My name's Chandler Poling, and I'm really excited to be here. If you weren't here in the previous panel, I am a co-founder of the Uncanny Experience, an immersive X-Men fan convention that takes place in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm a co-host of X Reads and X-Men Experience podcast. And I've had the great fortune of getting to know the X-Men 97 voice cast over the years, and they have graciously allowed us to do this amazing panel, so I'm really excited to have them. I don't know if there's anybody who works in this room as far as that works for LA Comic Con, but we're short a mic, and we need their name tents. So if anybody works for LA Comic Con, please help us out by bringing us our mic and our name tents. But in the meantime, we are going to get cozy up on stage here. I'm going to call up first and foremost legacy actress Catherine Disher. Come on up, Catherine! Catherine is the voice of Jean Grey from X-Men Animated Series and Val Cooper in X-Men 97. After her, I'm going to call up Matthew Watterson, voice of Magneto. Come on up, Next, let's bring up Guy Agostini, Sunspot. Next, I'm going to call up Isaac Robinson Smith, voice of Bishop. Yeah. Come on up, JP Garliak. More. Last but not least, Morla Goradana, Lalandra. All right, well, so we're going to just share this mic. We're going to get a little cozy up here. Morla, that's the first time I said your last name out loud. Did I do okay? Okay, I panicked looking down at that last name. I was like, Okay, great. All right, well, guys, let's start with just talking about your X-Men origin story. How were you first introduced to the mutants? Where is it comics? Was it the cartoon? Was it your audition? I'm very curious, and I will start with Cappy.
Thank you. Yes, I like the word legacy rather than old. You know, when we first auditioned like 30 years ago, I don't think any of us, all of us in the original show would say we had no idea whether, except for George Buza, who had read the comics growing up, so he knew. But the rest of us had no idea what mutants were, and that was my first introduction to the whole world. All I knew is and I actually auditioned for Storm, believe it or not. Yeah, I know, at the time even, I was like, I don't think this seems right. But like a good little actor, you do what you do. And I don't even remember auditioning for Jean Grey. I'm sure they did. I'm sure Larry back there didn't just hand it to me. But what I knew was I had been doing kids' cartoons for quite a while, little kids' cartoons. And what I knew was that this was a completely different animal. The writing was more like a radio play. It had all these huge issues and ethics and morality and these. So I knew it was different, and that's what attracted me to it. And I was right, and I think that's why 30 years later people are still rewatching the old one, because it aimed like this, over kids' heads, made for kids, aimed over their heads, and kids absorbed these huge lessons without even realizing that they were absorbing them. And it's still relevant today. So the writing, it's all hands set together. And Eric and Julia on the wall, the writing and the original show is why we're still here talking about 97. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Matthew, talk to us about your X-Men origin. How were you first introduced?
Mine was actually through the Fox films. Oh, that's
so project.
There are advantages to theatre background. Yeah, mine was through, my original exposure to it was a comic here and there. I was in boarding school in England when the original show came out, so I didn't see it because of prison. So I would get, people would have comics, but it was never a continuous run. So you'd get one issue here, one issue there, one issue there. And they were cool, but every single issue, the team was different, who was on whose sides was different, who was connected to who was different, and so you would only sort of get snippets. So I didn't really develop an understanding or an affection for it out of that. It was the Fox, live action films, but when I think back as well, I already knew all of the characters and I knew the basic setup, and I don't exactly know where that came from, just general osmosis through culture. But that was the first sort of continuous storyline that I saw with the live action. And then when this job came about, my homework was to go back and watch the original 5 seasons of the animated series, because I have an awesome job and my homework is brilliant. And so that's what sort of filled it in the middle. And then, just going to now that we have the beauty of the internet, so you're like, wait, who's that character? You can go and immediately find out their entire character history, their powers, their abilities, the 12 people who've been credited as their parents in different issues and in eras and things like that, and be like, I don't know what's happening, but everyone seems to be having a really good time.
For me, it was the original animated series back in Brazil. Watching it, probably like everybody on a Saturday morning at my mom's kitchen, and that was probably one of maybe the first introduction to superheroes. And Wolverine was my favorite character, and then from there all the X-Men movies, a big fan, and then Logan and all of that, and then but yeah, it was the animated series.
This is gonna sound like a strange intro, but my first real intro to Marvel in general was the 2002 Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. And so that's probably not seeing my thing. It was when I saw those, I was like, there's this whole other world I didn't know existed, and so I was just swept in by the whole story, and I started to collect comics at that point. My favorite comic that I have is Spider-Man 50, where it's a Spider-Man No More, and I got Stan Lee and John Romita to sign it and everything. So I've been a nerd for a very long time. So that was my whole intro, and then, but what was weird is I somehow knew the X-Men animated series theme song already, and I didn't know when I heard it or how I heard it. It was just in my head, and I was like, that's bizarre. So maybe, I don't know if it was like a calling card to later in my life, but I of course watched the show, and it was such a magical time of cartoons. That, Batman the animated series, Spider-Man animated series, all in the 90s. So X-Men was a natural progression, and I just loved the characters, and sitting here and getting to call Catherine a colleague of mine is the coolest thing in the world. Just to be with these people that I grew up with. But yeah, that was my intro to the X-Men world, and then the Fox movies as well. My friend and I watched them endlessly, and so I'm so happy to be here. But that's how I got into the mutant world.
Amazing.
My answer has always been the Fox films, but now that I really think about it, so when I was a kid in the 90s, back in the 90s, our social lives were not on our phones, they were in the mall. So I was always hanging out at the arcade at the mall, and I would watch I was a voyeur, I would watch other people play because I was crap at button mashing. And that's how, so Marvel vs. Capcom, the animated series, the original X-Men video game, which makes no sense, but is so good. It was that really came first, and then the movies. But I didn't really get into the animated series until my audition, because I was a Power Rangers fan, and I would come home from school and sit down and turn on the TV, and I would see the end credits of X-Men as the Power Rangers would start.
It's so fun to hear how our stories are similar and dissimilar and the points of commonality. I also, a child of the 90s, was, for me, it wasn't Saturday morning, it was after school. And I remember it was I could run home, and it was that great lineup. It was with the Batman and X-Men, and I just fell in love with X-Men. And I remember feeling oh, I'm too old to be watching cartoons. No one's doing this. I had to keep it a secret. And then I discovered coffee shop culture, and everybody at the coffee shop was talking about X-Men. It was oh, there's my people. I'm a coffee shop and X-Men kind of girl. And there was debates about Beast this and Wolverine that, and I was introduced to the world of the comics through my friend, who then was my coworker later at the coffee shop, and she would always just keep me updated about what's going on in the comics. And she's it's really deep. I don't know if I have enough time to get you caught up to speed, but eventually she did. And so yeah, when the audition comes, it's childhood dreams coming true. Yeah, and I feel that's kind of a similar experience.
Awesome. you because you voiced Lilandra. Lilandra is actually one of my favorite characters. We have not really connected, Marla and I, so we're going to connect right now. Lilandra is one of my favorite characters. How did you study for her? How did you kind of, embody an empress of a galactic empire?
I mean, when you let one already. No, I got the audition. I definitely did my research about her. Read, I think it was the first time that she appears in the comics is number 97, which I'm like, oh, this is fated. This is destined.
Yes.
And I had some delusion about like, oh, maybe this series is about Lilandra somehow. I'm like, no, it's not. But yeah, well, that's what an empress would think, right?
Right,
So
yes.
it was really kind of perfect. And I found this voice that was wanted her to be ethereal, and I love when a character is like, is she good? Is she bad? And wanted to find that with her. And I really tapped into Gillian Anderson in Hannibal for that. Like, is she manipulating him? Is she in love with him? Like, is it both? And yeah, so that was my North Star. Was
Oh.
Gillian Anderson.
Oh, I love that. So, because she's part bird, there was no bird call research? There's no...
It's a little
tweets.
birdhouse in your soul.
Yes,
right?
correct.
So it's an internal bird.
I love it. I love it. Kathy, I've got a question for you. I actually am going to jump back to X-Men the Animated Series because I've never asked you this question, but when you were Jean and Phoenix, I would love to hear about the subtleties of the difference between the two because, as we know, she became a cosmic entity, and I could hear it in your performance that you portrayed Phoenix in a different light, and I would just love to hear about it.
Oh, okay. I want to say, first of all, don't anyone tell Alison Seeley Smith that I did play Storm in Marvel vs. Capcom. I don't think she knows that still, and I'd just like to keep it between all of us.
Right now.
They just let me play all the female characters. It's just like, oh, okay. It's a lot of grunting. It's a lot of grunting, as I recall. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, the Phoenix. What? The grunting? It should be, though. It's a great name, isn't it? The grunting. It does. Yeah, no, I mean, Phoenix was just a larger, more theatrical character. And what a lot of people don't know is, and I talked to Larry about this, because at first they had me come in, and I started to record the Dark Phoenix, I remember that. And then they decided that they wanted a completely different entity to be the Dark Phoenix. It was going to be associated with a lot more sort of dark deeds, and they didn't want Jean, the all-American girl, to be kind of tainted with that. So they hired another actress, Jennifer Dale, not Jennifer Hale, Jennifer Dale, Canadian, and because we were all Canadian, I don't know if anybody knows this, but the first cast, we're all from Toronto, we're all Canadian, and so actually the first time I'm meeting everybody in '97 has been at cons, because even in '97 I'm alone in a studio in Toronto, and these guys are all recording in LA, so it's been great meeting everybody. So Jennifer Dale played the Dark Phoenix, but they would get confused. So they would call me in, and I would go, well, this is yes, she's transforming. It was always hard because she was transforming sometimes right in the middle of the line or whatever, and they were like, oh, I said, I think this is Jennifer, you want Jennifer for this on. They said, well, could you just do an impression of Jennifer? And I was like, okay, is Jennifer kind of doing an impression of me? That's so weird. And sure enough, and it would happen to her. She'd get called in, it would actually be one of my lines. So there are places throughout the Phoenix saga, I rewatched it a few years ago, and there are places in there where I can hear the voice change and it's the wrong voice. It's kind of like, going to a movie and seeing the microphone hanging in the shot, and Larry has a bunch of those kind of stories, and of stuff that ended up by mistake in the cartoon. But yeah, so it was just a power, it was just feeling the power. It's just what everybody loves about the Phoenix, is we all have this inside us. And it's just a matter of letting it out and then controlling it. Letting it out and controlling it. So yeah. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to come to that. Yeah, very short course.
I know. Matthew, what is a characteristic of a Magneto that you feel you embody yourself?
Where do I start? Looks like it.
No comment. I don't know. I don't know. There's a plethora of smart answers, but one of the things that I find fascinating about the character, and I've talked to production about this a lot and Ross about this a lot, is that Eric and Charles want the exact same thing. They just have a different way of going about getting there. And one of the things that's fascinating for me about Eric is that, unlike the majority of antagonists in anything, whether it's a superhero story or any fantasy or sci-fi or just a drama, is that there's nothing selfish in him at all. Like, he could go and be a teacher, be a blacksmith, be whatever he wanted, and go through his life and nobody would know that he was anything else and be left alone. He doesn't, because he's trying to make sure that people who can't protect themselves are taken care of, because he saw what happened when there was nobody to stand up for them. That makes him fascinating, because it's one of the few antagonists that he's not trying to become powerful, he's not trying to become rich, he doesn't want to be in charge, he doesn't want to run the thing, he doesn't want to be a dictator or an emperor or a king or anything. He wants everybody to be cool and then he can go home. And I really identify with wanting to just go home.
I'm realizing in context, because we've got Kathy, who is Val Cooper in the show, and Magneto next to each other. Could we hear that Magneto is right?
I was saying to Matthew, I just met him last week for the first time after doing those scenes together,
Right.
in the sphere. I watched 208 because I had to go back in and re-record some stuff last week and for season 2, and I sort of wanted to remind myself, and I watched 108, sorry. And there's that moment where Magneto is hung up on the wall, and Val Cooper comes in, but they leave it silent, like for a count of 5 or 6.
Yeah.
It's really, but it's powerful. It reminds me of that. Was it? Okay, I'm going to Miyazaki. You know the anime, Japanese anime. Yeah, Miyazaki. The way he uses silence, and that silent moment is so powerful. And yes, Magneto was right.
Woo!
Hair. His hair in the wind.
Magneto clearly had to deal with without Sassoon.
You should be on the cover of a bodice ripper.
Talking about Speedo, do you want to talk about what you got recently? Directly from Argentina.
Okay. Yeah. Amelia, who's our amazing character designer, who designed like the initial looks of all the characters for this series. She was in Argentina.
She's Argentinian, but she was in Uruguay. I guess she was.
But so she was back in Argentina, and she saw in a shop I'm assuming it was a shop, it could have been just some guy with a trench coat, a Magneto figure that is clearly not official Marvel. It kind of looks like somebody took a Gumby and repainted it, repainted it like just in the Speedo and put it in a box. And so she saw it, she's like, I have to get that, and got it. And then she was going to give it to me at SDCC, but I wasn't at SDCC, so she gave it to Guy. And so Guy has now had it for like 3 months. So Guy is now wandering around LA with a figurine of a man in nothing but a Speedo. And he's just sort of clutching desperately because he's like, I don't want anything to happen to it, and then Amelia will be upset. And so finally, a couple weeks ago when we were at a con, he's like, I have this, I can give it to you. It's really cool. It's on my desk at home. I mean, it's not. It's terrible. It looks so wonky, and it looks like it was just sort of painted with model paint on rubber. It's really it's a lot of fun. I was very scared for a second. I'm like, do I have? Did you just order something to my house?
Maybe I'll bring it back from Brazil. We'll see.
I don't want this meeting from Brazil. I've seen that. Make it more revealing.
Guy, question for you. We were just talking about this in the last panel I was. Sunspot's journey in the series kind of reflects the coming out story. You know, he's coming out as a mutant to his parents. And you know, that a lot of queer people relate to, all sorts of people relate to this kind of coming out story. So I was curious, how do you relate to this type of storyline? And is there a moment where you felt like you were hiding something and then you had to, you know, reveal something to your parents or whatnot?
Yes, actually. Not gonna reveal what it was, but you know, I said, like, you know, I had, several times, you know, where I felt so, you know, nervous or, you know, anxious about sharing something so, you know, personal and deep, you know, to my mom. But especially after the pandemic, where a lot of things, you know, drastic and difficult in my personal life happened, and yeah, so it's like, you know, I thought of not doing it. I didn't do it for a while, and then I finally, you know, created the courage. You know, and it's my mom. She loves me. Thankfully, there was no, like, it was only acceptance. There was not like a different, you know, attitude afterwards. So, but there was a lot of that mindset. You know, remembering all these difficult moments I've had to, like, share something that's so personal and so deep.
Yeah, well, it comes out great in your performance. And a shout out to your costume, by the way. He's dressed as Sunspot. Woo! And I think the designer's in the room. I thought I saw him earlier. Is Felix in here?
Oh, I think he left.
Well, either way.
Yeah.
If you guys see another Sunspot out there, that is the guy who made this outfit for Guy, which
And this
is
was
amazing.
created, it was my first time cosplaying last weekend at the Uncanny Experience, which is an amazing con. It's very immersive, so if you guys don't know about it, please check it out in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And yeah, I was convinced to do it, so there it is.
Awesome. All right, Isaac. Now you were an X-Men fan before landing the role of Bishop, so I was very curious when you got the sides or you're doing your audition. Are you like, because I know they code these things. You don't know it's X-Men '97.
Yeah.
Were you just like, this is X-Men? This is clearly it. Like, and how did you psych yourself up to be like, I need this role?
I think that happened about maybe 2 minutes into reading the material, because like we get it, and like he was saying, like we don't know what it is necessarily, because when you're voice acting, you get auditions a lot for a lot of different things, and it kind of spans different genres and different kinds of categories and everything. So this just came in like any other audition in an email from my agent, and I didn't really know what it was. When I looked, I was like, it's kind of a weird name of a show. Okay, I'll look at it, and I opened up the file, but it was like several steps. It was weird. It was like, you had to open the thing, then download it, put it on the desktop, and put in a password, then like go to another thing, and then open it up in some other PDF and some other file. It was like a lot. It's like, this is very heavily guarded. I'm not sure what. And then I got into it, and it still didn't really make any sense because the context was some weird story that I couldn't really understand, and the names were all things that I didn't know. I was like, okay, I'll try to use my imagination like I usually do to try to get some semblance of what this character could be. And then I saw the word storm in it. I was like, oh, okay. And then I saw Professor Xavier, and I was like, oh, and that's when I like lost it. But I was by myself, so I was even more insane than I normally am. I was by myself, just like freaking out, but I didn't really know it was the show. I think that sort of came very slowly, because I thought it was like, oh, this might be a video game that they're doing, or this might be just a one-shot, like, special animated, like, I don't know, some holiday thing. But then I realized, I was like, oh no, this is legit the show. And I was so excited because I didn't know that there would be an opportunity to become part of something like this, you know, again. And I didn't even, there were a couple of rounds too, because I did the first batch of auditions. I think I actually auditioned for Professor Xavier and a couple of the characters. I'm so glad that Ross got it. He's incredible in the show. And then it was the second round where I auditioned for this guy named Boris. It was his name in the script. But it actually ended up being Bishop as I looked through. It would have been so funny if that was the final name of the thing. So much less impactful. But yeah, as I read through, and luckily, like it was said earlier, we have the beauty of the internet to research and figure out the different history and the background of all these things. So I looked up Philip Aiken's original performance in the show originally as the original Bishop in the '92 series. Thank goodness I had it, because I had a lot of great things to base off of, and then kind of give my own spin, and yeah, but yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's see.
seen a lot of futures. The Magneto, leading the X-Men, that's a new one.
Do you guys love it that you just get to open your mouth and people applaud? Like,
This is the greatest job in the planet.
JP, down to you. Morph, he is identified as a non-binary person in the show, and this confuses some fans because they feel he did not present this way originally. We've seen the discourse online. You've done interviews about this, I know. I want to know, being genderqueer yourself, if there is a way that you can kind of explain to an internet person that you can later in life discover your identity and evolve.
I can have gender. Yeah, no, it's been fascinating that they fixate on that, but somehow they have a little less to say about that he suddenly has a great face. Like, I think what was really interesting for getting cast as Morph is that I got cast as within, I'm not even gonna say a year of telling my agent, like, oh, by the way, I identify as genderqueer. Like, I consider myself a pandemic inspired gender explorer. Like a lot of people that actually got to slow down and actually look at themselves in the mirror and think about who am I, I started to grapple with my gender and was like, oh, I think there's some verbiage for this. I think for Morph, a couple things. First of all, we understand the term non-binary. I don't think Morph does yet. I think Morph's in the 90s. We didn't have the term non-binary until about 2001. We had the term genderqueer. So I think that this is something that they're going through, like coming to understand themselves. I mean, gender is such an intangible thing. Like, we as humans in our cave brains, like, we try to boil it down to, like, the clothes we wear or what's in our pants, but like, it's so much more ephemeral and intangible than that. And we're creatures of stardust that are trying to process everything that we are through our monkey minds. And sometimes the words that we use for it are imperfect. They're often imperfect. And it's over time, as we get to know ourselves better, that we get to understand better terminology to be able to understand ourselves. So I think if you asked Morph in 1997, like, what's your gender identity? They'd be like, what? But if you got into a deeper conversation of like, hey dude, are you a man? They'd be like, I don't know how to answer that. I think they're very much in an in-between space. And I think if we, hopefully if they survive, you never know. If Morph lives to, let's say, somewhere around 2015, 2016, when we start to understand this terminology so much more, and you got to ask them that question, I think they have a much different answer than they would in the time period that we currently see them. So, all to say, gender is a journey, and it doesn't mean that it's a flippant thing that you're just like, I'm gonna be this today. It's looking at yourself in the mirror every day and starting to understand yourself a little bit more perfectly.
And staying on the topic of Morph, which of the characters that Morph morphed into is your favorite?
Juggernaut.
Well, there's two answers. Like,
I just want to make sure we're okay in the back. Okay, well, it looks like we are okay. All right.
Two answers. One, just for like silly, giddy fun. More smash! But I really think that my favorite is Jean. And I don't even get to voice Jean. And not just the time that you're thinking at the very end, but also the time in the beginning, like when he turns into Jean, basically to be like, hi, I want to tell you that this is a toxic relationship and you need to back off. She is not only unavailable, she is with baby. Not happening, my bloody. And I love that Morph has the ability to just razz people in, that very specific way.
I love it.
And I also love, Morph is a collaborative character. I voice Morph as the Hulk and when he's just Morph, but obviously Jen Hale played her. So the way that Jen Hale interprets the way Morph talks, I just love that. And the way that Ross interprets Professor X talking like Morph, it's super fun.
Wonderful. All right, I have a few kind of quick questions for you guys. We'll start with Morla. If there was another character, whether we've seen it in the show or not, who would you want to voice?
I have a friend back home in New Orleans who, before any of the X-Men, before he even knew that there was going to be a series, before I ever auditioned for it, he would send me little images of the Dazzler, like, you're her. Just so you know, you're her. If you're ever feeling bad about yourself, you're her. So I love Dazzler. I would love to.
I would love that too. What about you, Judy?
I know that redhead Dazzler perished in Genosha, sorry. I'm really hoping that blonde, kiss makeup Dazzler resurrects, so yes, that for you. My answer changes a lot. The one that I'm going back to, so my very first animation gig was doing this wacko thing called Marvel Mashups, which was basically like Space Ghost Coast to Coast, where they took old Marvel cartoons and they recut them up and redubbed them, and it was on Disney XD. And one of the voices I got to do, I was mostly Jarvis, and I was occasionally Hawkeye, but one of the characters I got to play I was the Black Cat. Spider-Man was falling right in my trap. So I'd love to play that again.
Going back to briefly my love of everything Spider-Man, I think literally any version of Miles Morales, if I could voice it.
Yeah. Woo!
Well, I would choose my first superhero love, Mr. Wolverine, and especially after meeting Cal Dodd. I just, I do a very bad impression of the Brazilian version. I was like, but yeah, I would love to do Wolverine.
This is voicing it in the show?
People kind of interpreted this to any animated character, which is fine, but we'll say Marvel Universe, X-Men family, adjacent.
There's part of me that just, to annoy him, wants to say I want to do Gambit just because. It's like, so yes, I want to take Gambit from AJ.
I know I'm supposed to say Mystique, but no, you know who it, Psylocke. She only appeared in 2 of the original series, and I did play her in some of the video games, again, just grunting. And I kind of, she's barely clothed. I would like to try Psylocke.
Who would I play? Oh my god, well I'm not an actor, so I don't know, but that's a good question. You caught me. I feel like I would be a good angel. I'll say angel. Something I could put a preppy guy.
Doctor Strange.
Yes, Doctor Strange. Yes, I love Doctor Strange. All right, we're almost done, but I want to hear from you guys because you know they're gonna love it. What's your favorite line your character says?
I've already said it. I mean, I'll say it again. Magneto was right. Best line of 97. I know.
I was just thinking about that. No, I think I'm gonna go with.
I'm trying to be better.
Do not make me let you down.
Yeah. Woo! Mama.
Don't forget single.
Back on the mic, this was a little loud. My favorite is
Time for an exorcism, punks.
I'm not often on a panel with Matthew, so I'm going to say this one just hoping that he has the response. Yo, someone's daddy didn't get him a pony for his sweet 16.
That's the exact line I remember.
Hush now, beloved. You may bark later.
Wonderful. Well, guys, I'm going to just start wrapping this up. I want to make sure everybody in here knows that the cast is going to be down in booth 406. So you guys can go take your selfies with them down there. You can get autographs down there. I highly recommend you go visit the cast. And before we go, I know you guys can't talk about this, and I hate putting you on the spot. What can you tell us about season 2?
Actually, I made up an X-Men joke. You want to hear my X-Men joke?
Yes.
Okay. I made it for Larry Houston. He thought it was hysterical. You might have to work for Marvel to actually get it, but so how many X-Men does it take to screw in a light bulb?
Not many.
I can't tell you. I signed an NDA. Yeah, I mean, we just finished recording. You know, I've actually gone back to do, rewrites and stuff. They're just beginning to get the animation now. So unfortunately, I asked them like a week ago, and they said 2026. Maybe 2025.
There's a deadline on it or something.
Oh, really? Yeah. Hey.
2026.
But they're writing the third season, so that's always hope.
I mean, I'll just tell you, Godzilla is in it, Bruce Willis is in it, James Bond is in it. Everybody dies, everybody is resurrected, everybody dies again. They're all resurrected as different people.
Yeah, no, that's it.
It's a big job.
Switch.
yeah.
All right. Right. Like I said, I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but I know that people love to get even a nugget of that. It's happening.
It is happening.
It's happening. All right, guys. Well, I'm just going to ask you to please help me in thanking this cast for being here. Awesome. Booth 406, everyone. Booth 406.